In the bustling heart of Orion Station, a grand tapestry of lights, corridors, and countless souls, there stood a small spice shop that defied every grand design surrounding it, narrow in frontage, unassuming in decoration, and hidden between a bank of humming coolant ducts. The sign above its weathered door reads simply, Vance's Fine Spices. The proprietor, a mild-mannered man of humble bearing, answered to the name Leo Vance. He had come from a line of station traders, though his father and grandfather had hardly ventured beyond the local star systems. Yet, none of them, not a single ancestor in that venerable chain, had ever garnered the kind of renown that would, in the days to come, envelope Leo like a cloak woven of rumor and speculation. Outside, the thoroughfares were always crowded with travelers and immigrants from 100 worlds. Transports rumbled past the storefront, their anti-gravity drives causing the metal walkway to hum beneath countless boots. Orion Station, in this twilight of its prosperity, was a place of both ancient tradition and unstoppable progress. High above the habitation levels, colossal domes of reinforced glass showcased the spiraling galaxies beyond. Meanwhile, hidden in the darkest recesses of the station's underbelly, shadowy figures conspired for wealth and dominion, forging alliances that might topple star-spanning empires. Leo lived a simple life, content with his neatly arranged jars of spices, his carefully stacked inventory of exotic teas, and a small back room where he would blend custom mixtures. He could name the aroma and taste of 1,000 spice varieties from across the known galaxy, and he had a warm smile for any traveler who dared cross the threshold of his establishment. Indeed, it was a kind of secret knowledge amongst the station's connoisseurs that Leo's handiwork bestowed subtle wonders on whomever partook of them. The harsh dryness of Orion's recycled air would vanish with a sip of his saffron-laced brew, and the dreariness of a long shift often melted away beneath the tang of his star anise concoctions. Unbeknownst to Leo, however, there was a subtlety to his gift that ran deeper than mere culinary wizardry. He had never questioned why certain customers, often the wealthiest patrons, would slide strange talismans across his counter in the hope of receiving yet rarer blends. Nor had he questioned the occasional glimmer he perceived in his own reflection when he ground exotic leaves by the mortar. For all his gentle nature, Leo was content to remain ignorant of the forces that swirled around him, as unstoppable as cosmic storms. One evening, just as the station's lights dimmed to indicate artificial night, a figure appeared at the threshold. The door slid open with a hiss, and in stepped a woman cloaked in tattered black cloth. Her posture wavered, and the air around her seemed charged with an electric tension. Leo looked up from his ledger, and for a moment, his kind smile vanished, replaced by quiet concern. He recognized the look of a weary traveler, though there was something uncannily dire in her countenance, like a soldier who had crossed too many battlefields. She came closer, and the overhead lights revealed the sheen of sweat on her brow. 3 swords protruded from her chest, each one lodged with horrifying certainty. No blood stained the shop floor. Rather, some strange energy pulsed around the blades, as if holding her grievous wounds in stasis. "Help me," she whispered, voice hoarse and desperate. Even as she spoke, she fought to remain upright. Leo's heart thudded. Such a sight would alarm even the most hardened mercenary, yet his immediate reaction was neither fear nor panic, only compassion. He dashed around the counter, arms extended gently. "My goodness, you're hurt," he exclaimed, stating the obvious in his shock. His eyes darted to the swords, their hilts shaped in the likeness of snarling beasts. He had seen many strange artifacts in this galaxy, but never 3 swords embedded in one living person. "Yes," the woman gasped. Then, with a trembling hand, she gripped Leo's sleeve. "I need a place to rest, even if only for a moment." A shiver coursed through her, and the clang of steel echoed softly in the quiet shop. In a rush of concern, Leo guided her toward a cushioned chair behind his counter, the same seat where he usually sat to weigh out spices. Without another word, he offered a steaming cup of tea, his immediate instinct for any situation. She accepted, though her hand shook, nearly spilling the hot liquid. As he watched her attempt to drink, he could not suppress a growing dread. Those swords could not be removed without killing her, he thought in horror. However, a compulsion overcame him, a sudden, irrational certainty that perhaps they could be removed without harm. Though he did not know it yet, this was no ordinary visitor. Nyla Zivar, an ancient warrior of legendary repute, had come to Orion Station seeking refuge from a fate sealed centuries ago. She was bound by a curse, pinned to mortality by those 3 cursed swords. Each blade represented an epic of torment, each year a slow dance with the specter of death. The swords had traversed time and space with her, ensuring she would not die, but neither could she know peace. Leo's eyes flicked between the woman's pained expression and the swords that shimmered with a baleful aura. "This is beyond me," he murmured, though his voice was gentle. "I'll call for the station's medics," or perhaps he trailed off, not sure what kind of specialist might handle such a predicament. "No," the warrior rasped. "No medics. They cannot help me. I came here because—" She inhaled sharply, then summoned what remained of her strength. "They said there was a prophecy that if a worthy soul would pull free the sword meant for him, I would be loosed from my eternal bondage. Yet I have searched 100 star systems, from the diamond dunes of Alardra to the spiral citadels of Sereth Prime. Everywhere, the prophecy rang hollow. And now I am here." Leo blinked in confusion, but even as the words settled, he felt a strange resonation in his chest. It was as if a silent chord had been strummed deep within his being, its vibrations echoing from his heart to his fingertips. "I don't know anything about prophecies," he confessed, feeling the tension coil within him. I'm just a spice merchant." Nyla smiled a grim, weary smile. "We are all just something until the moment destiny knocks at our door." "Forgive me," she said, swallowing thickly. "I must rest now." With that, she closed her eyes, her breathing labored but steady. Leo, bewildered beyond measure, gently checked her pulse. It was slow, faint, yet she clung to life. He soon found himself crouched beside her, a steadying hand on her arm, as though any movement might cause her further injury. So many questions raced through his mind. Who was this woman, truly? Why did she speak of prophecy? And how did she know about a sword meant for him? In the dim hush of the closed shop, the flicker of overhead lights cast shifting shadows across the woman and her swords. Outside, Orion Station's corridors glowed with the gentle lull of night, while cargo freighters docked and departed with mechanical grace. Every now and again, a faint hum from passing foot traffic penetrated the walls. But within the spice shop, time seemed to stand still. Leo released a soft sigh, closing his own eyes. Perhaps at dawn, or at the next cycle of station operations, he might learn more. For now, all he could do was place a warm blanket over his unexpected guest and hope that, in the morning, she might still be breathing. Little did he know, as he drifted into an uneasy vigil, that the unassuming removal of one of those swords, in an unguarded moment, would unleash a torrent of events spanning star systems and centuries of hidden lore. Indeed, his future would never be the same, nor would the fate of countless worlds. When morning came, or what passed for morning within the artificially regulated cycles of Orion Station, Leo awoke to the station's overhead lights brightening by degrees. He blinked away the remnants of restless slumber, half expecting to discover the events of the previous night as nothing more than a dream. But there, slumped in the padded chair, was the mysterious woman, Nyla Zivar, breathing shallowly yet very much alive, 3 swords still protruding from her chest. Moving carefully, Leo prepared another cup of tea, infusing it with subtle touches of thyme and ginger known to invigorate a weary body. He knelt by Nyla, gently touching her shoulder. "Good morning," he said, though his voice trembled slightly. "Will you try to drink this? It might help." She opened her eyes, and though her gaze still bore a haunted weariness, she managed a nod of thanks. With surprising care, she lifted the cup to her lips and sipped. A soft sigh escaped her, a sign that the warm liquid offered some relief. For a few moments, they said nothing, letting the hush of dawn linger. Then she cleared her throat. "I appreciate your kindness," Nyla said, her voice softer than the previous night. "Too often, strangers have spurned me, or sought to exploit my condition. For all that I have wandered, seldom do I find a gentle spirit in my travels." She paused, face tightening in a flicker of pain. "However, I must speak with you more plainly now." Leo swallowed, fighting an instinct to look away from the swords. "I'm ready to listen, though I'm not sure if I can be of any help." His uncertain tone mirrored the confusion that still roiled in his thoughts. She nodded, eyes glancing around the shop. "I am Nyla Zivar, a warrior, by necessity rather than preference. Long ago, on a far-flung world called Thornax, I was cursed by a vengeful warlord whose name is best left forgotten. He and his line possessed dark knowledge, gleaned from the cosmic tides that swirl beyond mortal comprehension. They bound me to a fate wherein these 3 swords, each forged from the remnants of malevolent stars, would remain lodged in my body. They do not kill me, nor do they allow me to die. Instead, my life has become an unending purgatory, my soul tethered to the steel." Her voice broke, and she lowered her gaze. "I have seen friends wither away and enemies multiply over centuries. Yet I endure, forced to carry the weight of these blades. Leo listened, enraptured and horrified. He was only vaguely aware of the subtle aroma of anise and cloves that pervaded his shop, reminiscent of the million subtle scents he had cataloged over the years. Somehow, those details felt trivial before the woman's extraordinary confession. "That's unimaginable," he murmured at last. "To live like that for so long." Nyla continued with grim resolve. "There is a prophecy tied to this curse, lost to the ages and scattered among star charts older than entire civilizations. According to the texts, if ever a mortal of pure heart should draw forth the swords, starting with the one meant for him, it would shatter the sorcery that binds me. But many have tried, for the prophecy also speaks of the power that shall be granted to one who successfully removes even a single blade. Entire warbands have fought to test their strength against my burden, only to fail. Some simply died in the attempt, while others vanished altogether, consumed by the cursed steel. Yet I endure." She gazed at Leo intently, as if searching his soul. "I do not know why I was brought here, to this station, to your shop. Nor do I have any proof that you are the one the prophecy foresaw. But I have felt your presence, a resonance like a whisper that tells me perhaps the time has come." The spice merchant opened his mouth, only to close it again. He considered the events of the night before, how he had felt drawn to her, the strange compulsion to help. Yet the notion of being part of such an epic puzzle left him dumbfounded. "I'm no warrior," he finally said, voice unsteady. "I have no special training, and I've never left Orion Station, except for a short trip to a moon outpost once. I can't possibly be who you think I am." Nyla exhaled, her posture rigid but her eyes soft with empathy. Destiny rarely announces itself with fanfare. The greatest heroes often begin as ordinary souls, untested by the storms of fate. Do not mistake your humility for incompetence. I've seen enough to know there is power in you, perhaps hidden in plain sight. A flicker of uncertainty still danced in Leo's eyes, but he offered a faint, reassuring smile. "Well," he murmured, "you're not the first person to say something odd about me. Some customers who enjoy my blends claim there's a transformative quality in them, but I've always assumed it was just good marketing or maybe a psychosomatic effect." The moment he said it, he recalled the ephemeral glimmer he sometimes saw in his own reflection, a sparkle that dissipated whenever he tried to observe it too closely. Nyla seemed to ponder his words, her face pensive. "Small wonders can hide grand mysteries," she said softly. "Yet for now, let us not rush. I must regain a semblance of strength, and you must decide whether you will attempt to draw one of these swords. Until then, neither of us can say what fate has in store." So began a peculiar routine in the spice shop. Nyla remained, her presence shrouded in quiet tension, though she strove to be a courteous guest. She helped Leo shelve canisters and measure out powders for the day's customers, careful to keep her back turned when visitors arrived. Most patrons hardly noticed her, for the folds of her tattered cloak concealed the blades, and the power that cloaked her presence dissuaded casual inquiry. Throughout the days that followed, Leo observed her quiet resilience. She spoke rarely of her past, and even more rarely of the curse. Instead, she asked about the station's customs and the nature of Leo's life, how he learned to blend spices, where he got his exotic stock, and why he offered a free cup of tea to every traveler who stepped inside. In response, he found himself speaking freely of his passions, the subtlety of star pepper from the Rescon belt, the nutty sweetness of Aravac beans, the bright tang of Hellion rose petals. He recounted childhood memories of searching for unique flavors on the station's lower decks, guided by old traders who possessed knowledge as ancient as the cosmos itself. In time, he began to notice how Nyla's eyes lit up when he described the complexity of flavors, how they shimmered, albeit faintly, with curiosity and longing. It was as if she sensed a deeper truth behind his words. He even caught her delicately inhaling the aroma of his new spice mixtures, as though she sought to decipher the whisper of hidden energies locked within them. Meanwhile, life on Orion Station continued much as it always did, though rumors buzzed in the halls about new conflicts forming on the frontier. Whispers spread of an upstart power called the Zidorian Consortium, rumored to be mobilizing war fleets near the station's outer sectors. Others spoke of an ancient empire that had been stirring from centuries of dormancy, a shadowy dominion known as the Zalathan Imperium. Their robed envoys were rumored to move among the starports, quietly assembling relics and artifacts of unusual provenance. Such talk rarely mattered to Leo, who simply wanted to keep his shop running smoothly. Nonetheless, the swirl of galactic politics seemed to intensify each day, as though converging on some fateful juncture. One evening, after a long day of trade, Leo and Nyla sat together in the shop's dim interior. The overhead lights were low, and the hum of the station seemed more subdued than usual. Nyla sipped her tea slowly, wincing occasionally at the weight of the swords in her chest. Though she moved with caution, she exuded a quiet fortitude. A hush lingered between them until she spoke. "Leo," she said, voice more certain than he had heard before. "I sense a gathering tension, something far beyond me or my curse. Darkness seeps into the far corners of the station. I have walked these corridors at night, and I hear whispers carried by the ventilation ducts. People speak in hushes about the coming of an emperor or a hidden empress whose ambition might burn through star systems. I do not know which rumor is true, but the sense of imminent conflict weighs on me." Leo nodded, setting down the old ledger he had been absent-mindedly perusing. "I've heard the gossip too. Conflicts flare like solar storms throughout the galaxy, but rarely do they touch Orion Station so directly. Yet something feels different lately. Officers in the corridors wear worried looks, and I've noticed more security checks at the docks." He tried to smile, but the moment demanded seriousness. "In truth, I never cared much for the intrigues of far-off empires. But I would be lying if I said this didn't unsettle me." Nyla met his gaze. "If hostilities boil over, this place could become a battleground. Trade routes will be contested, and someone will look to seize control of strategic points like Orion Station. There is no telling what an ambitious warlord might do upon discovering the station's resources or your own hidden gifts." Leo swallowed. "I'm not sure I have any special gifts worth seizing." Yet even as he spoke, he recalled how certain connoisseurs claimed his spices could alter perceptions, lighten burdens, or bolster courage. Was it mere superstition, or something more tangible? "That remains to be seen," Nyla replied. "But I would ask you this. Should the day come when you must decide whether to defend your home, will you have the strength to do so?" He shifted his weight, unsure how to answer. "I've never been tested like that," he admitted. "I always believed that goodwill and hospitality could diffuse conflict. I serve free tea even to those I sense might be dangerous, hoping that a small kindness can soften hearts." He looked at his companion. "Is that naive?" She regarded him thoughtfully. "Naive, perhaps, but also admirable. Sometimes the greatest leaps of faith begin with small gestures of compassion." Silence reclaimed the shop, broken only by the hum of air recyclers. In that moment, the station lights flickered, a standard glitch, but it cast jagged shadows that made the swords on Nyla's chest glint like malevolent eyes. Leo's heart pounded. He could not shake the sense that the galaxy's storms were converging on them, that soon fate would knock on his door with an insistence he could no longer ignore. And so, side by side, they faced another night, weighed down by the knowledge that both the swords and a looming galactic strife might soon demand more of them than either could freely give. For the first time in his life, Leo prayed for a peace that was not guaranteed. The irony of it was not lost on him. A man who sold exotic spices and soothing teas, abruptly enmeshed in ancient curses and the tides of war. Were it not for the calm exhalation of Nyla beside him, Leo might have felt utterly lost. But she was there, unwavering in her stoic endurance, living proof that even the heaviest burdens could be borne. He closed his eyes, inhaling the soft fragrance of ground cardamom that lingered in the air, and whispered a silent promise to himself. If destiny was to test him, then he would meet it with what courage he possessed. The days turned into a strange lull, a period of tenuous calm stretching between the ordinary bustle of commerce and the gathering storms of fate. News of conflict beyond Orion Station continued to filter in, entire fleets mobilizing in the outer sectors, alliances fraying like old cloth, and warlords forging pacts in secret halls. Through it all, Leo did what he always did. He greeted customers with a smile, offered them tea, and measured out blends of spice that promised fleeting relief from their troubles. Meanwhile, Nyla's presence became a steady backdrop to his life. She still wore her tattered cloak, still moved with the guarded grace of a warrior, and still carried the 3 swords embedded in her flesh. Sometimes, after the shop closed for the night, Leo would find her hunched over in the dim light, trembling with silent agony. Though the stasis-like power around the swords kept her from bleeding to death, the torment of her curse never truly abated. One afternoon, as Leo stood in the doorway of the shop, gazing across the thoroughfare at the swirling crowds, he caught sight of a robed figure moving through the sea of faces. Something about that silhouette, gliding in a stately manner, sent a shiver down his spine. The robes were dark and finely embroidered, and though the figure's face remained hidden beneath a hood, Leo glimpsed a faint luminescence emanating from underneath the fabric. A subtle, alien glow. The figure paused, as though sensing his stare, and turned its head in the spice merchant's direction. Even across the bustling walkway, Leo felt an unsettling wave of awareness, as if icy fingers brushed the edges of his mind. Then, with a swirl of robes, the stranger vanished into the crowd. Heart-pounding, Leo retreated into the shop. Nyla, who was reorganizing jars on a nearby shelf, noticed his pallor. "What troubles you?" she asked. Though her voice was calm, her eyes were keen with concern. "I saw someone out there," he managed, gesturing vaguely toward the station's corridors. "They seemed to notice me, somehow, in a way that felt unnatural." Nyla walked over, her footsteps careful. "Describe them." Leo swallowed. Tall, robed in black with intricate patterns, like star charts woven into the fabric. Their face was hidden, but there was a glow, something that didn't look entirely human. She frowned. "I've encountered emissaries from various factions, but that description makes me think of the Zalathan Imperium, or perhaps a distant offshoot. Their envoys often wear robes inscribed with cosmic scripts, and some among them possess otherworldly traits." Her gaze shifted toward the door. "We must be cautious. The Imperium is known for its obsession with relics and items of hidden power. If they suspect you are more than you seem, they will not hesitate to investigate." Leo felt his pulse quicken. He had no desire to be the focal point of interest for a shadowy empire. "Then what do we do?" "For now, remain vigilant. We cannot afford to draw attention. If they come asking questions, keep your answers simple. Let them believe you are but a humble spice merchant." She paused, her face pensive. "And you must decide whether to attempt removing one of these cursed swords. The longer we linger, the more likely it is our secret will be exposed." He nodded, anxiety coiling in his gut. The notion of touching those ominous blades, let alone removing one, filled him with dread. Yet each day he grew more convinced that events were barreling toward a tipping point, and that he would soon be left with little choice. That evening, the station's artificial nightfall settled over the corridors, and Leo found himself standing by Nyla's side in the back room of the shop. The hum of the overhead lights was the only witness to the grim tableau. Nyla shrugged off her cloak, revealing the 3 swords in stark detail. The middle blade's hilt, shaped like a snarling dragon, caught the meager light and gleamed with a dreadful beauty. A dark aura shimmered where steel met flesh. Taking a shuddering breath, Leo gently placed his hand near the hilt of the center sword. His heart pounded so loudly that it seemed to echo in his ears. I don't even know where to begin," he whispered, voice trembling. Nyla's gaze was resolute, though sweat beaded at her temples. "Place your hand on the hilt, but do not pull yet. We shall see if the blade resonates with you. If it does not, the attempt will be in vain." With trembling caution, Leo set his hand on the sword's grip. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, a rush of heat that raced up his arm, blossoming into a staggering cosmic awareness. For an instant, his vision blurred. He glimpsed swirling galaxies, the birth of stars, and the yawning abyss of black holes. Countless voices seemed to whisper to him, each bearing fragments of a story older than civilization. Then, as quickly as it came, the vision subsided. Gasping, Leo pulled his hand away. He nearly collapsed, but Nyla steadied him. "What was that?" he rasped. She nodded grimly. "A fraction of the sword's essence, or perhaps the curse itself. But the fact that you survived this contact is a sign. Many would have been driven to madness by that flood of visions." Leo rubbed his temple, trying to banish the phantom echoes still ringing in his mind. "So, I'm the one?" he asked, both in awe and in dread. "If indeed you can remove it, yes?" she said quietly. But we must be certain. Try again, and this time, attempt to draw the blade slowly. Remember, if at any point the power overwhelms you, stop. Determination warred with fear in Leo's heart. He thought of Orion Station, of his small shop, and of every cherished memory that had shaped him. He thought of Nyla's centuries of suffering, bound by swords that would not let her die. Then, with a silent prayer, he gripped the hilt once more. The cosmic rush slammed into him anew, more potent than before. His mind soared through vistas of swirling nebulae, and he felt threads of ancient magic coiling around his consciousness like serpents. A thunderous roar filled his ears, as though 1,000 cosmic storms converged in one place. Every nerve in his body screamed for release, yet he held on. Gripping the hilt in both hands, he pulled. Slowly, the blade moved. The cursed steel slid through flesh, not a droplet of blood escaping, thanks to the suspended agony that was Nyla's condition. Sweat poured down Leo's face. He felt the weight of 1,000 lives pressing against him, as though with each inch he freed, the sword unleashed echoes of its harrowing past. Nyla hissed in pain, a low, guttural sound. But she did not cry out. Inch by inch, the sword emerged, revealing a blade etched with runes that pulsed faintly. Leo gritted his teeth, feeling as though his arms might tear from their sockets. Finally, with a final burst of determination, the sword came free. The moment it left her body, a surge of energy exploded outward, knocking both of them to the floor. A deafening silence followed. The sword clattered on the ground, its aura still dancing like black flames along the steel. Leo lay sprawled, chest heaving, heart hammering. Nyla gasped, pressing a hand to the wound in her chest. Then, incredibly, the wound began to close. The flesh knit together, leaving behind a faint scar that glowed with residual magic. Leo struggled to sit up, his limbs shaking. He looked at Nyla, speechless. Tears glistened in her eyes, and though 2 swords remained lodged in her, the removal of the first seemed to grant her a measure of reprieve. Her breathing steadied, and she whispered, "You did it. 1 sword is gone. 1 link in the chain is broken." In that moment, neither of them noticed the soft glow gathering around Leo's hands, nor the subtle shift in the air as though time itself held its breath. But they both felt a profound sense of release, a harbinger of a destiny yet to unfold. They remained there on the floor, side by side, as the station's hum continued uninterrupted. Outside, travelers passed by, unaware of the momentous event transpiring within the little spice shop. But in the unseen realms where curses are woven and prophecies are recorded, a ripple tore through the fabric of fate, setting in motion a chain of events that would soon reach far beyond Orion Station. When Leo finally rose, sword in hand, he felt an uncanny warmth in his chest, like an ember that refused to extinguish. Nyla looked at him with something akin to awe, and for the first time since her arrival, she dared to hope that her centuries-long nightmare might truly end. Yet, in the depths of her eyes, a lingering fear remained. For she knew that powers both ancient and new would be drawn to the sword's removal like moths to a flame, and that Leo's life might never be simple again. They sat in silence for a long time, letting the magnitude of the moment settle around them. At last, Leo managed a shaky laugh. "I suppose we should celebrate with some tea." Nyla smiled softly, despite the weight of 2 remaining blades. "That would be nice," she whispered. "Very nice." Little did they realize that, outside in the winding corridors, word had already begun to spread. No one could say exactly how the rumor started. Some insisted a tremor had shaken the station's sublevels, while others spoke of a sudden flash of light from a tiny spice shop. But the effect was undeniable. The old prophecies whispered throughout the cosmos were one step closer to fulfillment, and forces both benevolent and malevolent had taken notice. Soon after the first sword was removed, a palpable shift fell upon Orion Station. In the days that followed, the station's corridors thrummed with unspoken tension. Guardians in gleaming armor patrolled in larger numbers. Merchants spoke in hushed tones of an unusual spike in security checks, and rumor had it that certain passageways were sealed off without explanation. All the while, a peculiar stir of excitement and fear seemed to cling to the very air, as if the old walls held their breath in anticipation. Leo and Nyla tried to maintain an air of normalcy within the spice shop. Customers came and went, many remarking that the spices seemed more vibrant, more potent than ever. Some left with tear-brimmed eyes, convinced that the blends carried faint echoes of cosmic wonder. Leo found himself smiling politely, as always, but inwardly he was burdened by the knowledge that his unassuming life had turned a corner from which there was no return. Late one evening, as Nyla rested in the back of the shop, a quiet knock sounded at the door. Leo, surprised to receive a visitor at such an hour, hesitated before opening it. On the threshold stood a lean man clad in an impeccable uniform, an officer of the station authority. The insignia on his shoulder bore the name Bannon. He carried himself with formal reserve, though his dark eyes seemed to hold a flicker of genuine concern. "I'm sorry to disturb you," the officer said, inclining his head. "I'm Lieutenant Bannon of the station authority. We're conducting a discreet investigation related to unusual occurrences reported in this quadrant of the station." Leo forced a calm smile. "I see. How can I help?" Bannon cleared his throat. "We've had reports of a powerful energy surge near or within your establishment, something that sensors briefly detected, then lost. The authority takes such anomalies seriously, especially amid rumors of foreign agents. We're simply checking with local businesses to see if anyone witnessed anything out of the ordinary." For a heartbeat, Leo recalled the moment he had pulled the sword from Nyla's chest, the cosmic force that had coursed through him like a living storm. He summoned his best attempt at innocent confusion. "Nothing comes to mind, Lieutenant," he lied smoothly. "This is just a spice shop. We do occasionally test new mixtures, but I doubt they'd cause an energy surge." The officer eyed him for a moment, as if trying to decide whether to press the issue. Then he relaxed slightly. "Very well. If you do recall anything else, strange visitors or phenomena, please contact the station authority. We're trying to keep Orion Station safe." He offered a polite nod and slipped away into the corridor, leaving Leo's heart hammering in his chest. When he closed the door, Nyla emerged from the back room. Though her two remaining swords still jutted from her torso, she appeared steadier, her eyes less haunted. "They're closing in," she murmured. "We should be prepared." Leo nodded, rubbing his temples. "The station authority isn't the only one looking. I can feel it. Even my regular customers ask odd questions these days. Someone is stirring the pot." Indeed, the new wave of conflict soon reached Orion Station in a more tangible form. Freighters bearing the banners of the Zalathan Imperium docked at the main port, their robed emissaries wandering the corridors with cryptic purpose. Meanwhile, from the far side of the galaxy, the Zidorian Consortium sent sleek battleships rumored to bristle with advanced weaponry. Tensions simmered, spurred by ancient rivalries and newly forged ambitions. On the periphery of this mounting drama, a few adventurous souls spoke of the legendary cursed swords and a prophecy about their removal. Some claimed these relics could tip the balance of power. Others dismissed the story as fanciful myth. Yet talk of prophecy had a way of seizing imaginations, and the rumor that one sword had already been drawn from an immortal warrior was enough to set hearts aflame with curiosity and fear. The last thing Leo wanted was to become entangled in galactic strife. He thought only of how best to keep his small shop, and Nyla, safe. But circumstances had other plans. One night, just after closing, the door hissed open violently, and a small group of armed figures charged inside. They wore cloaks of deep violet, each brandishing sleek energy rifles. At their head stood a woman with an ornate crest on her helm and eyes gleaming with ruthless determination. "Leo Vance," she barked, voice echoing in the cramped space. "By order of the Zidorian Consortium, you will hand over the artifact you harbor and surrender the warrior known as Nyla Zivar." Terror shot through Leo's veins. His gaze flicked to Nyla, who stood behind the counter, her posture coiled in readiness. "I don't know what you're talking about," Leo said quickly, trying to sound calm but failing. "Don't play coy," the woman snapped. "We have reliable information that a cursed sword was removed here, an act only rumored before. The Zidorian Consortium demands it, along with any remaining relics attached to that warrior." Nyla's eyes flashed. Even with two swords still lodged in her chest, she radiated defiance. "You know not what you seek," she growled. "These blades are not mere relics. They are harbingers of doom. bound to my life by an ancient malediction. We'll take that risk, the lead operative declared, gesturing to her men. Seize them both. The armed intruders fanned out, rifles aimed. Leo could scarcely breathe. Out of desperation, he grabbed a handful of peppery powder from a nearby jar, one he'd been blending with subtle cosmic essences, and flung it in their direction. A burst of shimmering dust filled the air, stinging eyes and throats. The intruders staggered back, coughing and blinking furiously. Nyla seized the moment. She leapt forward, moving with lethal grace despite her injuries, and slammed her elbow into one attacker's helmet. He toppled like a felled tree. Another swung the butt of his rifle toward her face, but she pivoted, letting the blow glance off a protruding sword handle. With a deft twist, she struck him down, her cloak swirling in the chaos. Leo, heart thundering, scrambled behind the counter, tossing more spice-infused powder. The shimmering motes clung to the intruder's armor, disorienting them. He didn't fully understand how his mixtures worked, only that they seemed to warp perceptions and hamper coordination. It was as though the cosmic echoes he mixed into the blends had come alive to protect him. Within moments, the Zidorian operatives lay incapacitated. The leader glared up from the floor, furious yet helpless, eyes burning with frustration. "We will not be the last," she hissed as Nyla pinned her down. "Others will come, seeking the sword. This station will become a battlefield." Nyla's lips parted in a snarl. "Then let them know the cost of meddling in curses they do not comprehend." With a swift motion, she struck the woman's helm, rendering her unconscious. A tense hush descended. Leo and Nyla stood amid overturned tables and shattered jars, breathing hard. The soft aroma of spilled spices mingled with the acrid tang of fear. "We have to leave," Leo said at last, the realization dawning on him like a cold sunrise. "More will come, and we can't fight them all." Nyla nodded grimly. "But where can we go? Every empire, every faction with knowledge of the swords will soon be on our trail. We'll need to find a place to hide," Leo responded, thinking furiously. "Somewhere we can figure out how to remove the remaining swords without painting a target on your back, or mine. Perhaps the lower levels of the station, the old, half-abandoned maintenance decks. Hardly anyone goes there now." Without further argument, they hurried to gather what few essentials they could carry. Leo couldn't bring his entire stock, but he filled a satchel with carefully chosen containers, each filled with potent blends that might serve as a form of self-defense. A pang of sadness struck him as he left the shop that had been his life's work. The sign, "Vance's Fine Spices," hung askew, battered from the recent struggle. Under cover of darkness, they made their way into the bowels of Orion Station, navigating old service tunnels and bypassed airlocks. Flickering overhead lights illuminated their path only sporadically, leaving long stretches of gloom. In some corridors, ancient graffiti covered the walls, relics from generations past who once dwelled here in search of cheaper rent or illegal refuge. Here and there, they passed huddled figures who barely spared them a glance. Eventually, they found a disused storage chamber tucked behind a labyrinth of pipes. It was cramped and dank, but offered a measure of privacy. Exhausted, they sank to the floor. Nyla leaned against a wall, pressing her hand to the swords that still impaled her. Her face twisted in anguish. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted to drag you into such danger. My curse should have remained my burden alone." Leo shook his head, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Don't blame yourself," he said softly. "I'm the one who pulled that sword. Maybe it was always meant to be like this, prophecy or not. We'll find a way to remove the others and free you." Somehow, in the dim light, Nyla's gaze found his, filled with gratitude and something like resolve. "It means much to hear you say that." She glanced at the battered satchel of spices. "Though I must admit, I never expected your gift to be so formidable in battle." Leo managed a small, wry smile. "I only discovered it myself tonight. It seems my blends are more than just flavors. They carry a spark of something cosmic." A weary silence settled between them, punctuated by the steady drip of condensation from overhead pipes. Leo reflected on how quickly his world had spun out of control. He remembered the simpler times, mere weeks ago, when his greatest worry was whether he had enough star anise for the morning rush. Now, he found himself crouched in a hidden alcove, an ancient warrior by his side, while entire empires closed in around them. Yet, For all the fear gnawing at him, he felt a strange stirring of hope. He'd witnessed the partial liberation of Nyla from her centuries-long torment. He'd discovered that his spices held more than just culinary magic, and he felt, deep in his bones, that they stood on the cusp of unraveling the final layers of the curse. "Sleep if you can," Nyla murmured, pressing a cloth to one of her wounds. "We'll decide our next move in the morning. I have a feeling the future is rushing toward us faster than we know." Leo nodded, fatigue tugging at his every muscle. He closed his eyes, letting the echo of her words guide him into uneasy slumber. Beyond the metal walls, Orion Station spun through the void, a silent stage for the cosmic drama unfolding within. Forces moved in secret, alliances formed and fractured, and the name Leo Vance passed from one scheming mind to another. Little by little, the prophecy gained clarity, the final act drawing near with each breathless moment. In the twilight of the next day, hidden within the station's neglected decks, Leo and Nyla prepared for the fateful moment when they would attempt to remove the remaining swords. Rumors of their whereabouts had spread like wildfire, and both the Zidorian Consortium and the Zalathan Imperium deployed covert teams to hunt them down. Officers of the station authority, caught in the crossfire, struggled to maintain order in the face of looming chaos. Sensing the net closing, Nyla spoke with quiet urgency. "We may not have another chance to do this in peace. If we succeed, I will be free of the curse at last, and perhaps the swords will lose their power to draw so much darkness upon us." Her eyes, though shadowed with pain, shone with determination. Leo nodded, heart pounding. He set out a small circle of luminescent crystals around them, gleaned from old storeroom caches. Each crystal pulsed faintly, resonating with energies he scarcely understood but trusted to shield them from prying scanners. With careful hands, Leo placed the satchel of spices nearby. He had prepared a special blend earlier that day, infusing it with starry fragments from the sword he had already drawn, hoping it might dull the pain or reinforce Nyla's resilience. She breathed in the gentle fragrance as if it were a balm to her spirit. Then, in the stillness of that makeshift sanctuary, Leo grasped the hilt of the second sword. Its serpentine design glinted in the dim light, runes etched along its length. The cosmic flood surged into his mind again, a tempest of starlit visions and ancient whispers. This time, he did not resist. He let the waves of cosmic force wash over him, trusting in the strange synergy between his gift and the cursed steel. Slowly, the sword slid free, each inch a keening cry of magic. Nyla bit her lip to stifle a scream. When at last the blade emerged, power rippled across the space. Sparks of violet energy crackled and then dissolved into silence. A wave of relief coursed through Nyla's limbs, yet the final sword still remained. No sooner had Leo placed the newly freed sword aside than a chorus of footsteps echoed in the corridor. Armed figures flooded into the chamber, flashlights scouring the darkness. The Zidorians and the Zalathan Imperium had converged simultaneously, each faction bristling with weaponry. Caught between them, a squad of station authority officers shouted commands lost in the cacophony. Shouts erupted. Beams of concentrated plasma scorched the walls, and the chamber erupted into chaos. Leo and Nyla scrambled for cover behind an ancient console. Nyla clutched her chest, the final sword throbbing like a live wire within her flesh. Crouched together, they exchanged a resolute glance. Time was running out. If they failed to remove the last sword now, their chance of escape would vanish. More importantly, Nyla's centuries-long suffering would endure. Summoning every ounce of courage, Leo nodded, and she unfastened a buckle on her cloak, exposing the final blade. Amid the shouting and blasts of energy, Leo reached for the hilt. His mind reeled as cosmic thunder filled his head, but he forced his hands to remain steady. He began to draw the sword, each fraction of an inch accompanied by an agonized groan from Nyla. The swirl of energies grew so intense that arcs of violet lightning danced across the floor. The warring factions paused in astonishment, momentarily captivated by the spectacle. It was as though an ancient portal had opened, the air charged with primal force. Several soldiers recoiled in fear. Some tried to advance, only to be thrown back by the crackling arcs of raw magic. Finally, with a guttural cry, Leo pulled the sword free. A blinding flash consumed the chamber, and a wave of energy rushed outward, toppling crates and scattering armed fighters like leaves in a storm. For a heartbeat, everyone was suspended in a silent, luminous maelstrom. Then, just as swiftly, the light vanished. In the deafening stillness, Nyla collapsed to her knees, chest rising and falling in labored breaths. But as Leo knelt beside her, he saw that the wound had closed. No swords remained. The curse was shattered. Murmurs spread through the stunned combatants. One by one, the soldiers lowered their weapons, struck by something indefinable in the air, a profound sense that they stood at the crossroads of history. The prophecy had been fulfilled. With the final sword's removal, the centuries-old curse dissolved into memory. In that fragile moment of truce, Leo helped Nyla stand. Tears streaked her cheeks, each drop a testament to the pain and hope bound into her long ordeal. Then, with careful reverence, Leo lifted the last sword in his hand. The blade, once malevolent, seemed hushed, as though relieved of its dark burden. Its runes no longer glowed with ominous fire. Instead, the metal appeared dull, almost ordinary. A hush fell over the assembled fighters, from Zadorian agents to Zalathan envoys and station authority officers. No one spoke, transfixed by the pair at the chamber's center. A subtle warmth spread from Leo, like the comforting scent of spices on a cold night, and it seemed to calm the onlookers. Even the hardened warlords could not find the will to raise their weapons. Then, quietly, Nyla turned to face them. Her voice, once strained by suffering, rang clear and resolute. "The curse is broken," she announced. "These swords are no longer objects of power. They are remnants of a past that has tormented me, and many others, for far too long. Let this end here." Something in her words, and in Leo's gentle presence, disarmed the threat that had hung so heavily in the air. A few of the soldiers exchanged bewildered looks. Then, almost as if guided by an unspoken accord, they began to withdraw. The Zalathan emissaries slipped away, their dark robes whispering in the corridors. The Zadorian contingent followed suit, casting uneasy glances back at the swords. Even the station authority officers, who had come seeking answers, found themselves overwhelmed by a sense of awe, as though divine intervention had graced the station. In the aftermath, Leo and Nyla stood alone. The final sword lay on the ground, inert. She reached up, brushing her fingertips over the scars left behind. Her eyes brimmed with quiet jubilation and gratitude. "I'm free," she whispered, her breath hitching. "For the first time in centuries, I'm truly free." Leo drew her into an embrace, tears welling in his own eyes. The spice merchant who had never sought glory or adventure had somehow become the instrument of a prophecy. And in doing so, he had discovered a power within himself that transcended anything he had ever known. They returned to the upper levels in slow, measured steps, neither entirely sure what awaited them. But as they emerged into the corridors bathed in artificial daylight, they found a station on the brink of a new era. Whispers circulated about a cosmic event in the lower decks. Some spoke of it with fear, others with wonder. Yet in Leo's humble spice shop, now in need of repairs, a steady stream of familiar faces awaited, hopeful and unafraid. With Nyla beside him, no longer burdened by cursed steel, Leo reopened his doors. Though the galaxy still simmered with tensions and rivalries, a rare calm descended upon Orion Station. Word spread that Vance's fine spices offered more than taste. Some called it enchantment, others a simple kindness that softened the edges of hardship. In time, even the rumors of empire-shaking wars receded, as though the quiet revelation in that hidden chamber had eased the fervor of conquest. Travelers from distant stars sought Leo's blends, eager to experience the elusive warmth that whispered of serenity and second chances. And there, behind the counter, Leo would greet them with a patient smile, offering a cup of tea to friend and stranger alike. Nyla, meanwhile, found herself rediscovering life, no longer an immortal bound to eternal strife, but a soul finally unchained. She chose to remain at Orion Station, forging a new path. Sometimes, she trained those who wished to defend the station from future threats. Other times, she simply listened to the rhythms of daily life, marveling at the freedom to savor each moment without the shadow of unending torment. though the swords themselves were carefully locked away, destined for some secure repository where their malevolent echoes would cause no further harm. The memory of that night became a legend told in hushed tones across the galaxy. And in every retelling, whether by starship pilot or wandering bard, the story ended with a simple truth: that a gentle spice merchant named Leo Vance had pulled a cursed sword from the chest of a weary warrior, shattering a centuries-old hex and offering a testament to the quiet miracles birthed by compassion. Thus did the story close, not with fanfare or coronation, but with peace. For in the heart of Orion Station, a small shop thrived under the sign, Vance's Fine Spices, its door always open to those in need of healing or hope. And there, if one listened closely between sips of tea, one might still hear the echo of ancient curses undone and the soft, steady promise of a kinder tomorrow.